Dr. Cate Shanahan is the leading authority on how seed oils damage the human metabolism. After getting her Bachelor of Science in Biology from Rutgers University, Dr. Cate trained in biochemistry and genetics at Cornell University's graduate school before attending Robert Wood Johnson Medical School. A board-certified family physician with over 20 years of clinical experience and a New York Times bestselling author of The Fat Burn, Fix, Deep Nutrition, and Food Rules, her philosophy on nutrition is science-based and builds on the world's healing wisdom that the modern world has all but forgotten. Besides regularly appearing in and writing for national media, she has also worked as the director of nutrition for the Los Angeles Lakers. Her passion is helping people feel their best, and it's such a pleasure to welcome Dr. Cate to the show. All right, Dr. Cate, it's such a pleasure to have you on today's show. I've been a longtime reader and follower. You have taken a stand against seed oils and oxidized PUFAs. You have your book, Deep Nutrition, and Food Rules, which really give people the tools to understanding how food and nutrition can affect their health, their longevity, their microbiome, their hormones, all of it. And you've put so much work into all of your books. So thank you for being here and for sharing your time. I know you're a busy lady with lots going on.
Well, thank you very much for the nice introduction and for having me on your wonderful platform.
It's my pleasure. You know, you spent 20 years as a family physician in the clinic. How did you make the transition into and get really excited? When did you get really excited about nutrition for your patients, and how is it a part of your life now?
So I was always like ready to be excited about it because I actually went to medical school to really learn the underlying problems that caused, people's issues, their health issues, due to my own experience as an athlete, that I was constantly plagued with connective tissue problems like itises of my tendons and shin splints, and other people didn't have these issues. And I was like, what is the difference? And at that point in time, everything was about genetics. This was like in the 80s. This was a long time ago. And so I initially went to school for biochemistry and molecular biology, but quickly became aware of the two big things. Like, one was genetics are way complicated. We're not anywhere near where we can do what I, really wanted to do, which was to design some sort of fix for any genetic issue. And secondly, that in order to get grant funding, you pretty much had to, there's probably a better word for it, but I can't think of one right now. Just, you have to lie, right? You have to say, this is going to save the world. And, we have all this science nailed down, that they actually didn't. And I was like, I can't do that. So I had always wanted to be a doctor. So I went to medical school. The only reason I didn't go to medical school after college in the first place was because my dad was a doctor, and he said we were going to have a doctor glut, which never materialized. And that has to do with seed oils. So I was always looking for some underlying cause. I was actually, frankly, by the time I had graduated medical school, and then residency in family medicine, the additional training, I was kind of okay, well, this is just a job, right? Because I wasn't excited about just prescribing drugs, which was most of what we did. Like, some of it was really helpful and cool, like to teach people what's going on with their bodies and make important diagnoses. But for the most part, it was just kind of like pushing drugs on people that didn't seem to make a difference. And then I was living in Hawaii, and a few things happened to open my eyes to the reality that I had not learned enough about nutrition. In fact, I had learned everything there is to know about nutrition in this new school of nutrition thought that was invented whole cloth in 1948 out of nothing, as if there was no previous information. And I found that that was wrong. There was quite a bit of previous information that my training ignored. And the reason it ignored it is because it wanted to oppose it to make seed oils look good. And that was where I started to think about, gosh, what are these things called seed oils? And the reason that happened was because the American Heart Association got money from Procter & Gamble, which sold cottonseed oil products. including Crisco and cottonseed oil for cooking. And like that was obviously like conflict of interest, corrupt, but that's the American Heart Association. They are controlling medical education in nutrition thought for doctors, dietitians, nurses, the whole system. And so for me to encounter this potential conflict of interest and then dive into it, based on my training in biochemistry, I quickly, it was like a big aha moment. I was like, this stuff could be what I have been kind of sensing that was out there all along. This seed oils could be this very related to this underlying problem that I myself was suffering from, and so was everyone else that was having issues with high blood pressure that I was just managing, or cardiovascular disease that I was just pushing drugs on that didn't keep them out of the hospital, but that it was possibly related to the something called oxidative stress that happens when we eat too much seed oil. And oxidative stress is this imbalance in our homeostasis that causes all diseases. Like there's no controversy that all diseases, chronic diseases, are related to oxidative stress. And I mean things that beyond diabetes. I mean, cardiovascular disease and strokes and cancer and brain development disorders, including autism. That's related to oxidative stress. So it became clear to me that if I wanted to practice the kind of medicine that I had dreamed of, I could. Like all I had to do was spend an hour with every patient and not make any money and have all my colleagues think I'm crazy and take people off medications. That's all I had to do, was basically try to survive the system as a doctor who can actually help people. And it was impossible. So ultimately, after about 15, 20 years of trying, I left. And that's where I am now.
I mean, it's so frustrating to hear that this corruption is happening. Unfortunately, I feel like I've known this and seen this in so many different different corners of health information getting out to each and every one of us. I have so many things I want to ask you, but I want to give people the basics. Let's start with seed oils 101, because if everyone's hearing that seed oils might be causing oxidative stress and be laying the foundation for chronic lifestyle diseases, I want them to have the information to change their life. Because you're out there writing books to help people do that. Let's give our listeners that information. So seed oils, what are they? What makes them something that causes oxidative stress, and why are you worried about them?
Mm-hmm. So, well, I'll answer the last question first. That's the easiest. Why are we worried about them? Because they are the root cause of all metabolic disease. You combine them with empty calories from sugar and carbs, and you get like another maybe 5 to 10% of the causality there. But seed oils are like 90 to 95% because they are toxic. So what constitutes a seed oil? Well, that's a really important question, because other people have been talking about this especially in the past few years, I've noticed. So I've been in this space since 2004, and I've noticed that a lot of people have kind of jumped on board, and they have different lists. And so the list that is based on the most science, I've been doing this probably longer than anybody else out there, and I have a broader background. So like, I think my list is the best. That's just all I'll say. So it's eight oils, not foods, but oils. So let's get that right off the bat. And these oils are all factory products. So there's 3 C's, 3 S's, and then 2 more. So the 3 C's are corn, canola, cottonseed. The 3 S's are soy, sunflower, safflower. The 2 more are grapeseed and rice bran. And collectively, I call them the hateful 8. And for anybody, any of your fans who might also be Megyn Kelly fans, Megyn Kelly was a Fox News host, but now she has a Sirius XM radio show. Megyn Kelly had me on her podcast in May, and then she shortly after that she launched like a Hateful Eight challenge. So if you want to kind of join her and tweet about avoiding seed oils, the Hateful Eight seed oils, go for it. You should check it out on Twitter. It's #HatefulEight. And so those are the toxic seed oils. And just to give you a visual of like why these things should not be considered food is they could not have existed before the industrial era. They are factory products. So it's not bad to have soy, the oil, as when you eat soy or corn or whatever, actual food, sunflower seeds, that's fine. Those things are not inherently toxic. But what happens is seed oils are produced in these massive factories. They are heated to extreme temperatures and pressures, and it just mangles the molecules and causes a lot of toxins to develop. To give you a picture of what does the factory look like, just imagine that opening scene. If you ever saw Sopranos, the opening scene where he drives by Elizabeth, New Jersey, and they've got like all these smokestacks spewing, filth into the air. A factory refinery for oil and gasoline is identical to a factory refinery for soy and corn and canola, these refined oils. So that just gives you a sense of like how artificial it is and why it shouldn't be considered food. I mean, we wouldn't consider motor oil food. And there's chemical differences between the two, but their biodiesel is actually made from soy oil, right? Biodiesel. So we're telling people, well, not me, the American Heart Association is telling people to eat biodiesel, that they're telling people that it's healthy. And so what happens? Well, it's a complex chemically, but it just mangles the molecules. And the reason that these 8 are on my list has to do with their fatty acid composition, and the types of fatty acids that are problematic in these oils are called polyunsaturated. And these seeds happen to have a very high proportion of these unstable fatty acids. These unstable fatty acids are unstable in such a way as that when you heat them, as in when you refine them or when you in the factory, or worse, when you cook food in them, they break down into toxic compounds that are in significantly high concentrations. According to toxicologists who study this, they are comparable levels in a single French fry to smoking a cigarette of just one of the toxins that he looked at, which is called crotonaldehyde, which is present in both cigarettes and French fries and anything you fry in seed oils, including donuts. So this is not fluff. This is not theoretical. This is serious toxicology. And the American Heart Association is telling people, doctors, training the medical system, that these things are healthy. And what that does is it prevents us from seeing the real cause of disease. So people sign up for all kinds of experimental procedures. They'll sign up for taking drugs with dangerous side effects. They'll end up getting sicker because they are never told the cause of their metabolic disease. And just to be clear, metabolic disease is chronic disease. I mean, you cannot separate type 2 diabetes from cancer. Their underlying root cause is the same. And in fact, it's well accepted that certain cancers and certain other conditions like thyroid are so tightly linked to diabetes that if you have one of these, you need to be screened for diabetes type 2. But the root cause of that, before you develop the late stage of diabetes, you've had early stage diabetes that is universally misdiagnosed. And this is related to the American Heart Association's insistence that seed oils are healthy, and how it's just completely misinformed metabolic health and preventative medicine, medical research, and everything we spend trillions of dollars in this country, like researching for the cause, researching for the cure, and treating and physically harming people in some of these treatments. It stems from the oxidative stress induced by seed oils. Not 100%, but the vast, vast majority.
Wow. That's heartbreaking. And it feels like we're so far from getting back on track when it comes to putting our dollars into research that can really prevent disease and really help us get out of this place of just illness. So let's take that toxic, your hateful eight, those toxic seed oils, and it seems to me, just to summarize, there are two reasons why this is not great for us. One, the toxins that are produced by heating, extreme heat on these PUFAs, creating specific toxins that can be as dangerous as smoking cigarettes. Are there other toxins that are important that we should know about that are byproducts from these extreme temperatures? And then on the other side of the coin, why, when people talk about polyunsaturated fats like our omegas, like that's your six and nines being healthy for us, why would an overexposure, overabundance of PUFAs be a problem on a
Very good
cellular
question.
level?
Yes, those are both great questions. So to the first question is, are there other toxins? The answer is yes. There's too many to list. There's too many for any single toxicologist to study in their lifetime, because there's so many that they require different types of equipment to measure them. And most toxicologists only have access to one or two. So these things are unbelievably toxic. And the toxicology of them has gone into thousands and thousands of pages of scientific journals that any doctor can read, but they're not trained to understand most of the terms. And they're certainly not pushed in front of doctors. They're not in medical journals. They're in pretty geeky scientific technical journals for toxicologists or for people who work in the edible oil industry, so that they can learn how to mitigate the production, the amount of toxins in the end product. And I say mitigate because they can never get it toxin free,
Right.
but they can try their best. So that's the first question. This is, like I say, this is not theoretical toxins like we talk about, like, oh, well, everything's toxic. It's in broccoli. Broccolis can cause cancer, and soy has phytoestrogens that are somehow linked to cancer. This is way beyond any of those kinds of theoretical things. This is indisputable, rock solid toxicology. There is an entire field of experts that study these toxins, because they can be produced in a myriad of ways. It's like cigarette smoking, right? They're kind of the end product molecule of a complex series of combustion steps that happen in the chemistry of when you oxidize something. Oxygen combusts, right? So you might be surprised to think that cigarettes and oil can end up with the same toxin. But if you think about it this way, that if you think about it in terms of combustion is the complete oxidation of a fuel, and the end products of complete combustion are water and carbon dioxide. So the final end product, if it were ever completely combusted, would be water and carbon dioxide. But that's not what happens in these complex systems of our body and the factories and so on and so forth. So you end up with myriad true serious toxins. So yes. So what was the other question? Is, oh, what about if you just have like a lot of polyunsaturated fatty acid that hasn't deteriorated into toxin, right? That was the second question. So that's a really important question. And I kind of explore that in depth in my book, The Fat Burn Fix, where I talk about, okay, we've been getting probably 15 to 25% of our total calories from polyunsaturated fatty acids in the past. It's increased over the past 5 decades, but now that's about where we're at. In history, this is unprecedented. In all of human history, the total PUFA content as a percentage of calories probably never exceeded 5. And so we're up around, at least 15 to 25. And it depends on how many seed oils you eat. So some people can go up to 40%. So why would that matter? Well, it turns out that there's a certain kind of composition of our body fat that our bodies are designed to use for fuel. And what we've got now ain't it.
Wow.
So what I'm saying is that our body fat now cannot be used to sustain energy. This is death. I mean, this is what kills people. If you can't get enough energy, you're going to die. So since the body is kind of smart, what do we do? How do we cope? Why are we still alive? Well, we've been overeating. We've been insanely hungry, and we crave an alternative fuel, which is sugar. And carbohydrates are full of sugar. So that is why people have out of control carb cravings. And that is why we have, people who are really having a hard time, even though they might want with all their hearts to lose weight, while they still have so much polyunsaturated fat from seed oils in their body fat, it's not going to work out very well unless you have a very specific strategy of how to cope with that. And that's why I had to write a whole book about, how to really lose weight and make it permanent, because most people are in this severely metabolically damaged state where, unbeknownst to them, even if they don't consciously realize they have a sweet tooth or carb cravings, they've been feeling an abnormal kind of hunger. And that drives overeating and unhealthy food cravings. So they're kind of stuck in this vicious cycle where they know they shouldn't eat the donut. They know they shouldn't have the candy or the chips or the soda. They know it, but they feel like they need it. And the truth is they do, unless they know how to build a meal that can sustain their energy and kind of stand in for healthy body fat until they've been off seed oils long enough that they've cleared them out of their body fat, which can take a minimum of like 3 months before you start really having healthy-ish body fat, and are going to be, where you don't have to worry quite so much about building the perfect meal every time. But the upside of that is it's not very hard to build the perfect meal. You can do it in seconds by pouring a glass of milk and some extra like cream or half and half in it. And you feel better immediately. Like upon your first well-built meal, you will feel noticeably better than if, your habit was to have like oatmeal and a banana for breakfast or something like that.
Ooh, so much to unpack here. So let's talk about people who are full of these PUFA seed oils. Building a perfect meal sounds like the first step in trying to remove these from our body. What is there anything we can do to really jumpstart the process now that people have the information of knowing how toxic the byproducts of these are in either cooking or production, and how, most of us, we don't want a quarter of the fat living in our body to be from seed oils. So how do we really move the needle and get rid of it?
Well, really the answer to that is mindset.
Okay.
You have to work with your body. There's no like hacking your way out of this. You can't. The only way to remove polyunsaturated fatty acid from your body fat is by burning it for fuel or using it to build like new nerve tissue or new cells, right? There's no other way of doing it. That's why it's so devastating to have too much of it in your diet in the first place. And just to kind of touch on an earlier question you mentioned about like, yeah, what is this about like omega-3 versus omega-6? What I'm saying is that they're both potentially problematic because they both can deteriorate into toxins, and they will both have the same impact on our metabolism when they are stored in our body fat. For complex reasons that we can go into if you want, people think that omega-3 supplementation works. It doesn't really work to do very much. And, once you've gotten off seed oils, it does almost nothing. So for most people, like there might be a few people who could benefit, like if they just won't eat nuts or fish or like really anything, then they might need, like if all they can eat, I don't know, is what, I can't even think of something where if they're that intolerant, but for the most part, the reality is it's just good diet. So that's why I say mindset is important, because I see a lot of people like immediately jumping from, okay, good, so these things are bad, so so like, how can I hack this? How can I beat biology or whatever? Like, I mean, hopefully that's not something that you've been doing. I'm sorry.
No, no, not exactly the hacker. Just really, really about blood sugar balance and whole food meals, good quality animal protein, like nutrient dense stuff, like is my jam. And then trying to manage blood sugar to manage cravings. But what you're, like what you're saying rings true to me, because there are times in which you're doing all the things and you're still like, yeah, a donut sounds great. You're at a restaurant and my husband orders fries and I'm like, okay, I'm going to make him listen to this episode so he doesn't anymore. But where you're like,
nothing wrong with that if you're in control of it, right? If you do it once in a while consciously and you feel like you're in control of it, that's absolutely nothing wrong. There's even nothing wrong if you're not in control of it. It's just that is a red flag for me as a person who wants to help you.
yeah,
I can tell you that will be in the way of you making progress if you're not in control and
definitely.
you put yourself in an environment where you can't say no to your cravings. But with this strategy of building the perfect meals, it becomes easier from day one. And I'm not going to lie, it's not like you won't still have at the back of your mind these ingrained cravings and ingrained relationships with food that are unhealthy. That will heal though, like it will heal. And I can tell you from my personal experience that it heals. Like it takes a while. It took me probably, I would have to say like 6 months of, being off of seed oils and getting really, really healthy diet, like pretty close to 100% perfect. Before I recognized that, oh my gosh, I don't even need this ridiculous sugary caramel syrup in my coffee anymore, because it tastes great just with the natural sweetness in milk and cream added to my coffee, which was quite a lot. Like it's more like milk and cream with added coffee, because I have like a cup of milk and like 2 ounces of cream, a lot of cream, and put some coffee in there. And it tastes like a chocolate milkshake if I have good coffee. But like I used to be totally slave to sugar before I made this change. And I didn't even realize how bad I was. I mean, I was hopeless. I once drove halfway across the state of North Dakota so that I could get a mocha frappuccino from the closest Starbucks, which was 100 miles away. And when I got there, it was sold out. And like, it was like literally the person in front of me in line bought the last mocha frappuccino mix. They didn't have any more for the day. And I was devastated. It ruined my week. And I still didn't realize that I had an unhealthy relationship with food.
I think it's probably resonating with a lot of people right now. We all have those relationships where you feel like you need a specific food, or your cravings are so strong that they're driving your behavior. But the example of taking a break from it and serving up high quality food. And your expert opinion, what is that perfect meal? I mean, you're pouring 2 ounces of cream in your milk. What like talk to me about what deep nutrition is. Where are we gonna where what are we gonna put on our plate and drink to be the best version of ourselves, to give our body a once over, to remove those PUFAs and feel our best.
So really all we need to do is, it's easier to talk about what not to eat than
Yeah.
what to eat. So I already touched on the seed oils. That stuff's toxic. A different category of not to eat or really limit is empty calories. Those are like the sugar and the refined flours. You want to limit those. Like, I don't tell people they can't have any sugar, but I do tell them that, it's maybe for a little while you're first getting off, while you're first trying to work with your metabolism and build healthy meals, try not to include any sugar, but that doesn't mean you can't have any carbs. So there's this whole, I'm sure you talk about the keto diet probably quite a bit, right? There's this huge movement now, kind of exploded in 2010, starting in 2010, of a super low carb diet called the keto diet, which is pretty high in fat and very low in carb. And I feel like it's a little too low in carb for a lot of folks who are very metabolically damaged, but don't have a certain type of type 2 diabetes. If you do have a certain type of type 2 diabetes, it's kind of complicated conversation, but then maybe you should do a keto diet. But anyway, if you don't, you can still have some carbohydrates with your meals. And like I mentioned, milk has lactose sugar. If you're not lactose intolerant, then that sugar can sustain you. So you can get the sugar that your body actually really needs when you're metabolically damaged. And at the same time, you're getting the healthy fats. And so you want to have just what I call, like, as far as the carbohydrates in that world, I call them slow digesting carbohydrates because they digest slowly and kind of give you this sort of time release sugar into your bloodstream that shouldn't cause a big insulin spike. And in fact, I check it periodically to see if it's doing that to me. And like last night, I had about, I don't know, close to probably maybe like 60 calories of carbs in my meal, but they were all these kinds of slow digesting carbs. And my blood sugar like went from 60 to 80. So not a problem. So these slow digesting carbs are something that when you're really metabolically damaged, it's a good idea to have them at least in two meals a day. And, technically milk sugar isn't particularly slow digesting, but when you eat anything with so much extra fat, it comes out of your digestive system slowly. So you don't need to know any of these details if you just like look at the meals that I put together in the Fat Burn Fix. But yeah, so what's not in the meal is seed oils. What's in the meal a little bit is some of these slow digesting carbohydrates. If you've used the term low glycemic index, it's the same idea. It's just more intuitive term for it. And then the other.
Sorry to interrupt. What are some of your other favorites other than, say, lactose paired with cream?
Sure. So I will often, people love, those yellow corn tortillas that you can get.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they're made out of corn masa, and corn masa is a lot slower to break down than corn starch, corn flour, and corn syrup, obviously. And that is a traditional food in South America. And you can use it to make like traditional Mexican meat and vegetable dishes. So that's an example. Mm-hmm. Or what I do a lot is I'll just load it up with cheese and some sandwich meat, or cheese and salsa, and eggs. I love cheese. So a lot of my, personally, I eat cheese quite a lot. So that's another kind of example of a very easy, ready to eat, slow digesting carbohydrate. And another one is old-fashioned German, like dark bread. So people who haven't seen that, there's this kind of like square shaped bread that weighs about 5 times what a Wonder Bread will weigh in about a quarter of the space. I might be slightly exaggerating, but it's very like nutrient intense compared to Wonder Bread. It's not fluffy, empty calories. It's real sprouted and fermented rye and wheat, and it's just delicious. And like I'll use a half of it because it comes in like these big-ish slices, so I'll cut it in half. And I can use that to like make a Reuben sandwich or really anything. I'll put more cheese on it or yeah. So that's a couple of examples that are very easy.
I think it's called the Norwegian fitness bread. Is that right? Is
Yeah.
that the one?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. How did
That's
you
good
find
stuff.
it? That's on my shopping list. How did you find it?
I think it was maybe like 8 or 9 years ago from Whole Foods. Like I just,
Oh, really?
yeah,
Oh, wow. It's like the same one that I get on my, I list it on, you can buy it from Vitacost because I don't have a Whole Foods anywhere near me,
yeah.
but I buy from this shipping company called Vitacost, and you can, anybody in the United States at least can get it shipped to their door. And I freeze it because I don't use that much. Like, even though I'm talking about these things, I don't have more than one of that per day myself because I only eat 2 meals a day. My first meal is already handled. It's the milk and cream and coffee. So I really only have one other opportunity. And I make it a rule for myself not to have more than one slice just because I don't have a big calorie budget and I'm trying to get a lot of protein and other minerals and vitamins and nutrients. So
Well, that segues us perfectly. Let's talk about the proteins, vitamins, and minerals you're sourcing in that second meal. And then, if you don't mind, can you touch on the fat that's present in the milk and cream and what's the composition there and what makes it superior to PUFAs?
yeah, so milk is the only food that's designed to nourish. And even though cows are entirely different mammals than humans and goats and camels and other kinds of milks we might consume, and people do consume around the world, the composition of the protein is nearly identical because we have the same muscle like composition, nearly identical. The composition of the fat is very, very similar. The only difference is that human milk early on has less fat and later on has more fat than your standardized cow's milk. But the fatty acids themselves are in alignment with what our bodies need. But there's a big caveat here. It has to be that the cow got fed a species appropriate diet. Just like humans, we need a species appropriate diet. We can't be eating grass. Cows can't be eating what we give them now, which is soy and corn. Cows need grass, right? But so if you're getting your dairy from a cow that was fed grass, it's much more nutritious than getting your dairy from a cow that was fed the conventional stuff, which is really unfortunate. That's the reality. But still, the fatty acid profile from dairy products is still very, very much better than the fatty acid profile from the seed oil, obviously. It doesn't even compare. What you get as a special bonus when it's grass-fed is you get way more of the omega-3s, like the ratio of the 6:3 is more species appropriate for us humans and for the calves. And it's also going to have extra vitamins. It's going to have like vitamin K2. It's going to have, because grass has got more minerals, the milk will have more minerals. So there's a lot to be said for dishing out the extra money to get this cheapest form of instant food, healthiest instant food that there is.
Yeah, that's about the fastest breakfast anyone has ever shared on the podcast. So, all right, so let's talk about your second meal. How are you getting your protein, vitamins, and minerals, and what are some of your favorite ways to get the good stuff in?
Yeah, so like it's really just any kind of meat or any kind of combination of meat and vegetables. Or if you want to have beans, just make them as nutritious as possible. which is, they're all things there's all extra steps that you can take. Instead of getting beans from a can, you can get them dry, you can soak them, you can then start to partially germinate them. These are steps that people traditionally did when they consumed these things, when they were the foundation of people's diets around the world, right? Classically, soy in Asia is not exactly consumed the way we consume it here, like in factory made tofu or just straight up beans. It's fermented, and like lots of fermentation, like for sometimes a year. There's 200 different kinds of fermented soy used throughout Asia. And the fermentation process enhances the digestibility. It enhances the benefits to the gut microbiome, and it magnifies the nutrition. So fermentation is kind of a way of taking what might not be an ideal initial food source, like beans, something that's not animals, and making it much more valuable, much more nutritious. But because animals are composed of the same types of basic raw materials that humans are composed of in terms of minerals, vitamins, fatty acids, amino acids, and other types of nutrients, choline, phospholipids, like anything you can name that is in your body. It's also in all of the like mammals we might eat, and pretty much most of the the poultry and fish that we might eat, because we're all basically recycled ideas of how DNA has decided to create an organism. The muscle technology is the same, the heart, the eye, everything is very much the same and has the same building blocks. So that's why, like, most people who get into this ancestral health space and try to reproduce or try to tease out what is a species appropriate diet for a human being, we end up with, lots of animal stuff, because that's what, we need. It's kind of like the easiest answer. It gives you everything you need. You can live entirely on animal products and be perfectly glowingly healthy. But I argue that, it's very difficult to do as a vegetarian. And I think it's impossible to do, unfortunately, as a vegan. And we can get into that if you like, but this is based on what Deep Nutrition really taught me. And Deep Nutrition is the first book that I wrote, and it was a quest to answer this question of what is a species appropriate diet. And I didn't start from scratch, right? I think that's very important. Before 1948, the science of nutrition was far more advanced than it is now. In 1948, we really just kind of threw everything away that humans had used to build healthy human bodies for millennia, for like our existence. We just threw all that away. We pretended that was valueless. And when I say we, I mean the American Heart Association. And they said, no, too much saturated fat, and you got to be like plant-based and low fat, and especially these seed oils are the healthy kinds of fats. Completely just demolished our relationship with food. Completely sends the message that anything, all of the thousands of years of traditional knowledge around food is valueless. And that's a deadly message, because that is what kept us alive until 1948 and kept us healthier in 1948 than we are now in 2022.
Yeah. So what were some of the things that you uncovered prior to 1948 that were eye-opening and inspiring to change your diet and to share this message with everyone?
So yeah, there was a gentleman named Weston Price, who was a brilliant dentist who traveled the world in search of the same, answers to the same question I was asking, which is, what is a species appropriate diet? And what he did that was brilliant, and I don't think anybody can really do anymore, is he traveled to places where well, first, actually, he defined what is a healthy person. How do you do that?
Yeah.
That's not something we learn in medical school. So what he said, and it makes perfect sense, is that a healthy person, their health depends not just on what they ate, but on what their parents and grandparents and so on ate. Now, he didn't know about anything about DNA or genes or epigenetics back in when he was working, which was the 1930s. But what fascinated about me about what he was saying was that he basically predicted what epigenetic science showed starting in the 1980s when we realized that genes are regulated by the food that we eat. And the food that we eat can affect not just how we grow, but how our children, grandchildren, so on grow. So so brilliant. He like predicted all of this just based on thinking through and some experiments he did and observations. And so he identified healthy people the best way he could, which was he was a dentist. So he looked at their teeth. And his hypothesis was that no other animal in the wild has crooked teeth. Why should humans? Why should we be plagued with cavities and die of dental infections as people did before antibiotics when he was working? Why should that happen to us? That's not normal. There's something we're not doing right. Something is making us grow abnormally. And he was, was convinced it was diet. And so that's why he was looking at teeth, because being a dentist, he was obsessed with teeth. And so he went to isolated populations in 11 locations around the world, where the first thing he did was made sure they were suitably healthy to then study. And being isolated, they generally were. They had way better dental structure, dental arches, healthier, straighter teeth, freer of cavities than the same kinds of culture when the people from that village, who were basically genetically identical, would go off to the cities for a generation or two. They would have developed abnormal dental arches, crowding of the teeth, sinus problems, all kinds of facial structural growth developments that were incompatible with perfectly straight teeth, perfectly functioning sinuses, perfect vision, properly draining ear canals, lack of sleep apnea. I could go on. You need to have a perfectly built skeleton of your face, your facial structure, in order to be perfectly healthy. And so he defined, that's what he did. Like, he just defined health. And this is something that is even now is borderline. It's so foreign to us that it's borderline politically incorrect to
Right.
suggest that we're not all equally healthy. That is a really dangerous idea, but it's an outgrowth of the poisoning of our relationship with our cultural past. We don't respect our own culture, whatever it is, like traditions around cooking.
Mm-hmm.
And part of every traditional culture was a recognition that what you ate affected how your child would grow and their health. That was just built in. So that's why I say we've just gone backwards since 1948. We are not even close to as well informed about nutrition and its impact on health. Preventative medicine, you could call it. We are not as capable of preventative medicine as people living all around the world 1,000 years ago.
It's heavy. It's heavy to think about, and you're totally right. I mean, I think about just even the canned good industry and the easy, quick hamburger helper style meals, and everything is fast and quick, and now it's delivered to your door in minutes, and there's no need to cook, and you pull it out of the freezer and you heat it up, and there's no connection to the our planet, the earth, the animals that are feeding us, and how our grandparents or great grandparents were raised. Um, for you in your life, how are you connecting to your past, your great grandparents, and how and what practices do you use to connect to your food?
So, well, I just like I realized that people all around the world, even though like our food looks different, it's actually chemically very similar. So I just like really love traditional kinds of recipes and like cooking shows. Like one of my favorite all-time favorite shows was something I was watching while I was writing Deep Nutrition, and it was Anthony Bourdaine's No Reservations. And he would, every country he went to, he had the same structure of what kind of food he would eat. And he would do like a fancy restaurant, he would do street food. And at the end, he'd always, it's like he was saving the best for last. He would always go to like a house and where some granny or somebody had been in the kitchen all day preparing this absolute feast of like their cultural faves, you know, whether it was in Italy or Alaska, where they just sat on the floor and ate a seal. They ate a seal. I was going to say sheep. Sheep. But all over the world, it was like the same kinds of things came up, and that's what I turned into what I call the four pillars of world cuisine in deep nutrition. And the four things that came up and that I try to get in my, you know, in my routines every week are fresh foods. That's why my milk is raw. I don't have pasteurized milk. So uncooked, so I mean, salads will do it too. Fermented and sprouted. So that's like yogurt or kimchi, or sprouted grain bread or that German bread. Organ meats, which I usually say for last because everybody goes, ew, at this point. Like liver, right? Liver is the most common one that we know about, but people literally used to eat every part. They used to eat nose to tail because they knew how to make it. When I say they knew how, I mean, they knew how to make it delicious, right? It's not like, oh, we're poor. We have to eat everything. I hate it when people talk like that. I hate hearing that because that is so disrespectful. These people had skills and they were getting better nutrition. So, you know, so don't say they're poor. They were rich in terms of their connection to nature and, you know, cultural tradition. So anyway, that's the organ meats. And then the last one is meat. I call it meat on the bone because they saved the bones and they use the connective tissue, the ligaments and the joints that connect the bones together, and they boil them to make broths and sauces and stews and gravies. And that is completely missing from American cuisine. It's everywhere else around the world, but not in America. So like that actually had a lot to do if like people are like buying bone broth now. Half of those companies that are selling bone broth wrote me in like 2013 or 2014 or years ago to say, oh, I just wanted to tell you that I started a company after reading your book. So it was very beneficial business wise, like, because it was not just a missing food group, it was a missing business opportunity. But I can't say that the same thing has happened for organ meats, unfortunately, except for like the dehydrated organ meats, which are nothing really like what you need, but better than nothing if you can't get what you need.
I have to give a shout out to Force of Nature, who does an ancestral blend. If you haven't seen it, you should check it out. They do 80% pastured, either bison or beef, and they mix with 20% liver and other organ meats.
Oh, right.
And they
Great.
make
That's
it
awesome.
super easy to make like ground tacos or burgers. And because those dehydrated organs or like even like the dried jerky versions, like I couldn't stomach those. I never got in the habit, even though I wanted to, of eating organ meats until Force of Nature made this ancestral blend, and now you know my kids and my family we're having those. We're having that meat at least like once or twice a week. So
Awesome.
major change in our diet based on that. But this is all, I love your pillars. This is all really important information for everyone listening. And I'd love for you to touch on raw milk, because I know a lot of people are afraid of raw milk, and there's a whole marketing arm of the dairy industry that tells you to be scared of it. So can we talk about what the risks are and where you source your raw milk and how you feel about it?
Yeah, so you should be afraid of raw milk if you're currently following a standard American diet. Your gut microbiome is really in terrible shape. And raw milk is not inherently bad, but sometimes it can just be sitting too long at the wrong temperature and wrong organisms will start to grow. And, for the most part, it's going to cause a stomach ache and nothing more. But, for infants, especially, or anybody with a weakened immune system, and frankly, anybody on a standard American diet who's markedly overweight probably does have really a weakened immune system. I wouldn't jump to it. It's something that you can kind of get to later. Start out with a pastured versus pasteurized. Maybe we should talk about that. So pastured means grass, pasteurized sounds very similar, very different, just means cooked to heated. So with the pasteurization process invented by Louis Pasteur. So he just, wanted everybody to bake their milk because he created this machine for doing that. And it was important back, 100 and something years ago when he did that in the setting of what was called swill dairies, where cows were fed leftover garbage from the brewery industry. Very bad diet for cows, and they had diarrhea all the time. So there was always poop getting into the milk. So when there's poop in your milk, you want to bake it. Yeah. So that's basically what the benefit of pasteurization is. But the truth is that it's a living real milk is a living and very nutritious food. It's so nutritious, microbes can grow in it. And if you don't have a healthy gut microbiome, that might give you a stomach ache or even worse. So I have a protocol in deep nutrition where I teach people kind of how to go from, if they want to try raw milk, like how to do it most safely, so that you don't injure your body in any way. You don't like imbalance your gut flora. Nothing bad happens. And then of course it's hard to get. in many states it's illegal. It's perfectly legal to sell people 800 calories of pure sugar, but if you want to get raw milk, the 800 calories of pure sugar has a 100% chance of causing eventually, metabolic disease. Perfectly legal to sell French fries that also have a 100% chance of causing metabolic disease. Not perfectly legal to sell raw milk that has like a 1 in 1,000 chance of giving you a stomach ache. Right. And a 1 in maybe 100,000 chance of actually making somebody who's not ready for it really sick. So what I do is I just, most places who are selling raw milk, they're so passionate about it because they are bucking the system. They understand everything that's working against our health in this country. And they feel like they're on a mission to reverse it. And they are heroes. They're heroic. So for the most part, they treat their cows really well. They're eating species appropriate diets as much as possible, and they take measures to keep it healthy. I've never encountered a farm where they didn't do that until I moved to Florida. So what happened in Florida was it's like 100 degrees here. The cows are probably just baked, coated, in organisms that just end up in the milk. And this one farmer that I was buying milk from I guess he was like in his 80s. And so he probably just wasn't able to bend under there and get it all clean the way that you're supposed to in the summer. So I was getting a stomach ache from the milk. I just switched to a different farmer.
Got it. No, it's good to like hear you've been through it and what we might experience, because I love like a raw cheese, but I haven't ventured into raw milk. I don't feel scared of it, but I would want a really good source and I would want to know like what to expect. So I'm sending everyone over to Deep Nutrition to get that protocol, and then we can go from there. Well, being cognizant of time, I want to thank you, Dr. Cate, for being on the show and for sharing all of your knowledge on seed oils and your 4 pillars, the hateful 8, what we can do to really build a plate to support optimal performance and wellness, to purge our seed oils from our body, and to get to a place where we aren't crippled by our cravings. So thank you for beating the drum. Thank you for writing the books that you're writing. I know you're writing a 4th, and I'm so excited to read it. So thank you for all of your time and effort in sharing this with your audience and mine.
Well, thank you for the opportunity to share this with your audience because it we have to, protect our own health. No one's going to do it for us. And the more consumers out there are looking for the good stuff, the more businesses are going to pop up, hopefully.
No, I mean, I feel like that's exactly the case. People like Jason Karp of Human Co. buying businesses and changing out seed oils and putting in place olive oil and things of that nature. There are people out there doing that. So you're exactly right. Your information is inspiring people to start bone broth companies and elevate other convenience food companies. So those thank you for sharing the science and breaking it down, doing all the research. We really appreciate. Where can people follow along? Where can they get your books? Where can they learn more?
Yeah, so please come to my website, which is drcate.com, drcate.com, and subscribe. I have a newsletter that comes out maybe once a month. I don't bother your inbox too much, but I also have a lot of resources that you get when you subscribe that kind of give you a knowledge, download real quick. And you can check those out and then decide if you like the philosophy. Then you really ought to get the books because it kind of fills in a lot of the gaps. You can only do so much in the downloads, short downloads.
Well, I give you a five-star review on your books. I loved Deep Nutrition, especially. That was such a good one, and like a guide for
Thank
people.
you.
So definitely go out and check out Dr. Kate's books. I'll put links in the show notes. And thank you for being here.
Thank you, Kelly.